I want to talk about repetition in Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. The narrator, as we discover very quickly, once she marries Maxim de Winter, seems to be possessed by one thought, and one thought only, and that is Rebecca was fantastic and I am terrible. In almost every social episode, she assumes that the person she's interacting with is comparing her unfavorably to Rebecca. This could be anyone, from the bishop's wife during a social call, to Beatrice, the sister of Maxim, of course, to the serving staff at Manderley, most prominently Miss Danvers. This is a narrator who tends to reduce difference to the same. In other words, every different event to her is the same. The meaning of every event is the same. Rebecca is amazing. I am not. Now, of course, as the novel unfolds, this clarity becomes murky as the narrator starts learning things about Rebecca that break into her romanticization of Rebecca. And she starts achieving a kind of status at Manderley that makes her feel a little stronger. But for most of the novel, this is someone who is constantly saying the same thing over and over again, to the point where some readers might find her storytelling to be kind of tedious because of its redundancy. And certainly some of the characters around her, like Maxim, for instance, might find her redundancy a little tedious as well. But the repetition is not only formal, meaning taking place over large swaths of the text. Also, it informs the style of the narrator, her storytelling, her sentence writing, I should say, from sentence to sentence. There's a nervous repetition to her style. And I want to look at three examples of this and then talk a little bit about how this stylistic habit informs some of the significance of the novel. So let's look at it. This is from an early chapter. Let me see what chapter it is. This is from chapter 6. No, I'm sorry, it's not. It's from chapter 5. And here we see the narrators, Maxim and the narrator are out on a little afternoon excursion in Monte Carlo. They're kind of getting to know each other a little bit. And of course, the narrator is quite nervous. She feels that she's falling in love with this man. She feels inferior to him. She feels inexperienced. She feels inept. She feels like he thinks she's kind of an imbecile. And at a certain point, he asked her, "What did you know about me when you met me?" And she says, "Why, that you lived at Manderley and that you had lost your wife." There, she thinks, I'd said it at last. The word that had hovered on my tongue for days, your wife. It came out with ease, without reluctance, as though the mere mention of her might be the most casual thing in the world. Your wife. So she mentions wife 3 times within just a very short period. It's almost like she we might say, if we wanted to analyze this, that she wants to be his wife herself, but also she's fixated on the fact that Maxim has had a wife before her. Another example of this kind of repetition occurs in chapter 6. Now, this is after Maxim has asked the narrator to marry him, and she thinks to herself, Miss de Winter. I would be Miss de Winter. I saw the polished table in the dining room and the long candles, Maxim sitting at the end, a party of 24. I had a flower in my hair. Everyone looked towards me, holding up his glass. We must drink the health of the bride. And Maxim saying afterward, I've never seen you look so lovely. Great cool rooms filled with flowers, my bedroom with a fire in the winter, someone knocking at the door, and a woman comes in smiling. She is Maxim's sister, and she's saying, it's really wonderful how happy you've made him. Everyone is so pleased. You are such a success, Mr. Winter. I would be Mr. Winter. So 4 times Mr. Winter. This is a fantasy. The narrator is constantly casting herself forward, imagining what life might be like very vividly. This is another habit she has that kind of keeps her from paying attention to what's going on around her. Not only does she think everyone's judging her harshly, she also tends to daydream about how things might be better. But in this passage, she says, I would be Miss De Winter 4 times, just as she talks about the wife of Max 3 times in the passage I read earlier. I'll go to one more example of this repetition, chapter 13. And this is in chapter 12. So here we are. The narrator is in the morning room at Manderley. This is the room where Rebecca spent most of her mornings. And the room is filled with all of Rebecca's things that she chose to be around her, very nice things. And our narrator has picked some lilac from the beautiful landscape of Manderley, and she wants to put it into a vase. And one of the serving men says, oh, well, the first Mr. Winter always used this vase. And here is the narrator. Then the alabaster vase was brought for me, already filled with water. And as I put the sweet lilac in the vase and arranged the sprigs, one by one, the mauve warm scent filling the room, mingling with the smell of the new mown lawn outside coming from the open window, I thought, Rebecca did this. She took the lilac, as I'm doing, and put the sprigs one by one in the white vase. I'm not the first to do it. This is Rebecca's vase. This is Rebecca's lilac. Rebecca, Rebecca, Rebecca. These are 2 of many examples of the repetitive style of this narrator. Now, what do we say about this? We can say that this repetition from sentence to sentence suggests a kind of nervousness. When we get nervous, we sometimes repeat ourselves. It can be a way of comforting ourselves, repetition, but also it can reflect an inability to find new words, so we repeat. So I think on the basic level, we can say that this very nervous narrator has an appropriately very nervous prose style. But there's more going on here, I think. Given the repetitions within sentences and given her repetitions in a larger way in turning every event to an invitation to demean herself, we might start thinking about Freud's idea that shows up in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, 1925, of the repetition compulsion. Freud in that book argues that, yes, the id has the sex drive, which is what he'd been thinking all his career to this point, but then he realizes that humans engage in habits that are not life-affirming. Humans engage in habits that seem to be life-destroying, that push against life. And the drive behind these habits, Freud called thanatos, or the death drive. So eros, love drive, thanatos, death drive. And in this book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Freud gives some examples of how the death drive manifests itself in neurotic adults, or maybe even psychotic adults. And one manifestation is the repetition compulsion, the urge to repeat doing the same thing over and over again. Now, Freud gives an example of how a young child who wants to be with his mother who's always gone has the little doll and throws it across the room and says, there. And then he'll run and get it. And he'll take it back to the starting point and say, here. He does this all day long. Now, Freud says this is an example of the child clearly feels like he's alone, he feels abandoned by his mother, and he has no control over the situation. But in throwing the doll away and bringing it back, he feels like he has control. So this repetition compulsion is psychologically, emotionally comforting to the child. But if an adult does this, Freud says this clearly isn't a habit that makes one's life difficult and frustrating, makes it almost impossible to function smoothly within society. So I feel like the deep agitation of this character, her deep feeling of loneliness, her deep feeling of ineptness, the repetition is a way of her trying to gain some kind of comfort, a way to kind of assuage herself. But of course, it doesn't help, because in thinking in this repetitious way, she's not able to find a kind of expression that might lead her out of her feeling of loneliness, abandonment, ineptitude. Let's take this another step. How is the repetition compulsion on another level a manifestation of the death drive? Well, what is repetition but a denial of time? Yes, time is change. From 1 second to 1 second, everything is different. But if I'm repeating, it's almost like I'm saying, I want everything to be the same. I desire stasis. I desire permanence. I want time to stop. Well, what does this mean? It means I want to be dead. If life is constant heterogeneity, motion, and if death is sameness, a corpse is a corpse is a corpse is a corpse, and stasis, then the repetition compulsion might be on the side, of course, of a kind of literally a desire to be outside of time, not in a way that suggests transcendence to a realm of light and glory, but to a place of total stasis, a kind of death. So this narrator on several occasions shows her inability to take seriously what's going on around her. As I mentioned in another talk, when she is with Max in Monte Carlo, she says at one point, "Oh, I wish I could bottle my good memories up in like a bottle, and they would be there forever, and I could take out the bottle whenever I wanted to and re-experience these." This is someone who doesn't like the passage of time. She doesn't want the past to go away. She wants the past to stay there. She wants to annihilate time. In this same conversation, she also says, "Gosh, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a young schoolgirl idiot. I wish I could be 36 years old." So there again, there's this feeling of like, I don't like time as it is. I want to move ahead of time to get away from the present moment, or I want to move back in time to get away from the present moment. And connected to these two instances of wanting to get outside of time, stop time, would be, of course, her constant daydreaming. She's constantly, instead of paying attention to what's going around her, daydreaming about something else. So even though the narrator is young, even though she appears as a kind of naif, someone who is innocent, she's constantly saying, "I wish I were an old woman. I wish I were an old woman. I wish Maxim and I could just be old together and drink tea together all the time." Well, that's what ultimately happens to them. So the narrator's neuroses definitely manifests itself ultimately in a desire to slow time down to nothing and live based on routine, regularity, rules, a total kind of comfort that comes with no agitation at all. Who wants this? She does. Most people would want the opposite. I want variety, heterogeneity, change, youth, possibility, dynamism, vigor, vitality, erotic energy. But our narrator seems to want the opposite of all these things in du Maurier's Rebecca.